What could make a hard, mountain-raised cowboy risk everything for a woman he had known less than an hour? The barn was burning. Horses screamed behind walls of smoke as sparks swirled into the freezing night. A little girl's knitted scarf lay abandoned in the snow. 20 yards away, a man with a rifle lowered it slowly when he heard the woman call the cowboy's name. The wind howled through the pines, carrying a secret no one else had heard. And standing in the middle of the chaos, neither of them realized the most dangerous thing wasn't the fire, the storm, or the men hunting her. It was the choice that had already been made days earlier in a crowded saloon. Before we begin, tell me where you're watching from and join us for more unforgettable Western love stories. Take your hand off her. The voice came from the back of the room. Not loud, not angry, just certain. The piano stopped in the middle of a note. A glass froze halfway to a man's mouth. Even the wind outside seemed to pause against the saloon walls. The man holding Zora Bennett's wrist turned slowly. "What's that?" he asked. The stranger in the corner rose from his chair. He was tall, broad through the shoulders, wearing a dark wool coat dusted with melting snow. His hat shadowed most of his face, but the room recognized him before Zora did. Rhett Dawson, owner of Stang Ridge Ranch. The kind of man people stopped arguing with before an argument started. "You heard me," Rhett said. The drunk looked around for support. His friends suddenly found the floor very interesting. After a long moment, he released Zora's wrist. The skin beneath his fingers was already turning red. Rhett never moved closer. He didn't need to. The man muttered something under his breath and walked away. The room slowly exhaled. Conversation returned in cautious pieces. A chair scraped. The piano resumed. And outside, the blizzard continued to bury Silver Creek beneath another layer of white. Zora rubbed her wrist. For 4 days she had been running. 4 days of train stations. 4 days of looking over her shoulder. 4 days of sleeping with one eye open. She was exhausted, but she wasn't foolish. Men didn't help strangers for free, especially not in places like this. "Thank you," she said carefully. Rhett looked at her for a moment. His eyes were gray, the color of storm clouds over mountain stone. Then he sat back down. "You should sit," he said. "You don't even know me." "No, then why help me?" He lifted one shoulder. "Didn't like what I saw." That seemed to be all the explanation he intended to give. Zora hesitated before taking the chair across from him. The wood stove crackled nearby. Someone laughed at the bar. The smell of coffee mixed with whiskey and wet wool. For the first time since leaving St. Louis, she was warm, and somehow that frightened her more than the cold. The bartender brought 2 cups without being asked. Black coffee, strong enough to wake the dead. Rhett pushed one toward her. She wrapped both hands around it. The heat stung her fingers. She welcomed it. Outside the window, snow swept across Main Street. Silver Creek wasn't much of a town. A church, a general store, a blacksmith, a boarding house, and this saloon. That was about it. The train conductor had announced an hour earlier that the tracks ahead were buried. No trains until the storm passed. Maybe tomorrow, maybe longer. Zora couldn't wait that long. Not if Silas Whitaker's men were close. She glanced toward the door. Rhett noticed. "Someone looking for you?" The question hung between them. For several seconds, she said nothing. Then she slowly reached inside her coat. Rhett's posture changed instantly. Not alarm, awareness. But instead of a weapon, she pulled out a folded piece of paper, a receipt, rail ticket, half torn, proof of how far she'd traveled. "I wasn't supposed to be on that train," she said quietly. Rhett waited. "I left before my wedding." That got his attention. Only slightly, but enough. The wind hammered the building. The old windows rattled. Zora lowered her voice. "The man I was supposed to marry owns banks, land, judges." She swallowed. "And he wants something I have." "What?" She touched the inside of her coat, not the pocket. The lining, a place only she knew. A ledger. Rhett's eyes narrowed. "Proof?" "Yes." "Of what?" "Land fraud." The answer settled heavily between them. Rhett looked toward the snowy street, then back at her. You trust me enough to tell me that? No, Zora admitted. Then why tell me? Because I think they're here. That was when the door opened. Cold air rushed into the room. Snow blew across the floorboards. 3 men entered. Long coats, travel dust, hard faces, not ranch hands, not miners. Men looking for someone. Zora's stomach dropped. The tallest one removed his gloves. She recognized him immediately. He had been standing outside her father's house the week before. One of Silas Whitaker's hired men. The room suddenly felt much smaller. She lowered her eyes, too late. The man was already scanning faces, searching. Rhett saw everything. The fear, the recognition, the way her fingers tightened around the coffee cup. How many? He asked quietly. What? How many men does Whitaker have with him? Usually 6 or 7. The hunter moved deeper into the saloon. Table by table, face by face. Closer, closer. Zora's pulse hammered in her ears. If they found her now, it was over. Everything, the escape, the ledger, her future gone. The hunter was only 3 tables away. Then 2, then 1. Rhett leaned back in his chair, calm as ever. What are you doing? She whispered. He looked toward the window. Snow covered everything outside. No road, no train, no escape. Then he turned back to her. Tonight, he said, you're my wife. Zora stared at him. For a second, she thought she had misheard. What? My wife? Have you lost your mind, maybe? The corner of his mouth almost moved, almost. But everyone in this county knows who I am. The hunter was getting closer. One more table, Zora whispered. Rhett ignored it. If they think you're alone, he said, they'll keep looking. And if they think I'm your wife, they'll think twice. The hunter stopped. Only a few feet away now. Looking directly toward them, Rhett stood, without hurry, without drama. He simply stood and placed one hand gently on Zora's shoulder. The entire saloon noticed. The hunter noticed too. Evening, Rhett called. The man nodded cautiously. Looking for someone? Maybe. Rhett glanced down at Zora, then back at the hunter. My wife and I were just discussing whether the storm will bury the North Road by morning. Silence. The hunter studied Zora, studied Rhett, studied the hand resting on her shoulder. Zora forced herself not to look away, not to flinch, not to breathe. Outside, the blizzard roared against the windows. Inside, every heartbeat felt loud enough to hear. And for the first time since stepping off that train, she realized her life might depend entirely on whether a stranger could tell a convincing lie. The hunter studied her face. Then he looked at Rhett. A long second passed, then another. Finally, the man shrugged. Sorry to bother you. Rhett nodded once. The hunter moved on. Just like that. No argument, no questions, no arrest. Zora waited until the men disappeared toward the far end of the saloon before she let out the breath she'd been holding. Her hands were shaking beneath the table. Rhett noticed. He pretended not to. Outside, the storm grew worse. Snow pressed against the windows like white ocean waves. You were right, Zora said quietly. About what? They would have found me. Rhett finished the last of his coffee. Yes, she looked down. What happens now? The storm happens. That was all he said. An hour later, they rode out of Silver Creek. The town disappeared behind curtains of snow. Rhett rode ahead on a dark bay horse, while Zora followed on a chestnut mare borrowed from the livery stable. The wind cut through layers of wool and cloth. Snow gathered on hat brims and coat shoulders. Neither spoke much. The trail climbed steadily into the Rockies. Twisted pines leaned beneath heavy snow. Rock outcroppings rose from the white landscape like sleeping giants. At one point, Zora nearly lost her balance when the mare slipped. Before she could steady herself, Rhett's hand was already on the reins. Easy, he said. Nothing more. Just easy. Yet somehow it calmed both horse and rider. The ride continued. By the time they reached Mustang Ridge Ranch, darkness had settled fully across the mountains. Warm yellow light glowed from 2 windows. A barn stood against the hillside. Smoke drifted from a stone chimney. For a moment, the place looked less like a ranch and more like a promise. A woman opened the front door before they reached the porch. She was somewhere in her 50s, wearing a thick apron over a dark dress. Her gray hair was pinned neatly beneath a scarf. "About time," she called. Then she noticed Zora. Her eyebrows lifted, only slightly. "This is Miss Zora Bennett," Rhett said. The woman studied her. "Abigail Turner," she replied. "Come inside before you freeze solid." The warmth hit Zora immediately. Wood smoke, fresh bread, coffee. The scent of a home that had been lived in for many years. Her boots left wet prints across the floorboards. Near the staircase sat a pair of small leather shoes. Children's shoes. She noticed them before anything else. A moment later, she heard footsteps. A little girl appeared at the end of the hallway. 9 years old, perhaps. Dark hair tied loosely with a faded ribbon. Large, watchful eyes. She stopped when she saw Zora. "Who's that?" Rhett removed his gloves. "This is Zora." The girl considered that, then looked directly at Zora. Not rude, just curious. "I'm Lily. Nice to meet you, Lily." Lily nodded once, then disappeared back down the hallway as quietly as she had arrived. Abigail shook her head. "She does that." "What?" "Studies people." Rhett hung his coat near the door. "She gets it from her father." The room became briefly quiet. Zora didn't ask questions. Something told her not to. Supper was simple. Beef stew, fresh bread, strong coffee. No one rushed. Outside, the storm howled against the house. Inside, only the crackling stove and occasional clink of silverware broke the silence. Several ranch hands arrived later, brushing snow from their coats. An older cowboy named Walter, a younger hand called Ben, 2 brothers named Curtis and Eli, all nodded politely toward Zora. No one asked why she was there. No one questioned Rhett. That alone surprised her. After supper, Abigail showed her to a small bedroom overlooking the eastern pasture. A quilt rested neatly across the bed. A kerosene lamp sat beside a wash basin. The room wasn't fancy, but it was clean, safe. For the first time in days, Zora slept without keeping one hand on her suitcase. Morning never came, at least not the way she'd expected. The storm remained. The mountains vanished behind white curtains. The trail to town disappeared entirely. "You won't be leaving today," Abigail announced while pouring coffee. "No, probably not tomorrow either." Zora looked through the frosted window. Abigail was right. The world beyond the ranch had disappeared. The days settled into an unexpected rhythm. She helped where she could. At first, Abigail protested, then stopped protesting. On the second day, Zora organized a stack of unpaid invoices scattered across the office desk. On the third day, she helped Ben count feed deliveries from the ledger books. On the fourth day, she spent an afternoon reading aloud to Lily in the small library. The little girl pretended she wasn't enjoying it. She turned pages too quickly whenever the story became interesting, but she always came back the next day. One evening, a mare went into difficult labor during the storm. The ranch hands were worried. The animal was valuable. Zora rolled up her sleeves and went straight into the barn. Hours later, a healthy foal stood shakily beside its mother. Walter removed his hat. "Well," he said, "I'll be damned." Rhett leaned against a stall door, watching, not speaking, just watching, the same way he always seemed to. That night, Lily found Zora reading beside the fireplace. Without saying a word, the girl placed an extra blanket across her shoulders, then immediately ran away. Embarrassed by her own kindness, Zora smiled. Across the room, Rhett had seen the whole thing. Their eyes met briefly, only a second. Then he looked away first. Several days later, while organizing paperwork in the office, Zora froze. A familiar name appeared across an old land agreement. Whitaker Banking Company. Her stomach tightened. Another document, the same name, then another and another. Silas Whitaker. Mustang Ridge Ranch had been dealing with his businesses for years. The realization settled heavily in her chest. Before she could think further, the office door opened. Walter stepped inside. His face looked different, serious. "Boss," he called toward the hallway. Rhett appeared. "What is it?" Walter removed snow from his hat. Found tracks near the north fence. The room went quiet. Tracks? Walter nodded. 3 horses. Zora's fingers tightened around the papers. Outside, beyond the windows, the storm was finally beginning to weaken. And somewhere beneath the fresh snow covering the mountains, someone had already found the trail to Mustang Ridge Ranch. The tracks disappeared by the next snowfall. That should have been comforting. It wasn't. For the next several days, Rhett posted one of the ranch hands near the north fence each morning. No one complained. Men who lived in the Rockies learned long ago that trouble rarely announced itself twice. Life at Mustang Ridge settled into an uneasy calm. The snow began shrinking from the fence posts. Water dripped from barn roofs during the afternoons. The horses spent longer hours outside. And every day, Silver Creek crept a little closer to normal. One evening, Abigail folded fresh laundry at the kitchen table while Lily worked on her reading lesson. The little girl stumbled over a difficult word. Before Zora could help, Rhett spoke from across the room. Perseverance. Lily looked surprised. So you do know how to read? Rhett raised an eyebrow. I've read a book or two. Lily grinned. It was one of the first genuine smiles Zora had seen from him. The moment lasted only a few seconds. Still, she remembered it. A week later, notices appeared across Silver Creek. The annual winter gathering would be held at the church hall. Music, food, community auctions. The whole county would attend. Abigail handed one of the flyers to Rhett during breakfast. You going? Probably. You taking Zora? The room grew strangely quiet. Lily looked up from her oatmeal. Zora stared into her coffee cup. Rhett folded the flyer once. Yes, that was all. Yet, something about the answer lingered in the room long after breakfast ended. The morning of the gathering arrived cold but bright. The mountains stood sharp against a blue sky. Snow still covered the higher ridges, but Silver Creek's streets were finally visible again. Abigail insisted on helping Zora choose a dress. You own exactly one suitable dress, Abigail said. Then my choices are simple. Abigail laughed. That's one way to look at it. The dress was dark blue, modest, practical, beautiful without trying. When Zora stepped onto the porch later that afternoon, Rhett was saddling horses. He looked up, then paused, only briefly, but she noticed so did he. Neither mentioned it. The ride into town felt shorter than before, perhaps because the storm was gone, or perhaps because silence had become easier between them. The church hall was crowded. Lanterns glowed from rafters. Children chased each other between tables. Fiddles played near the stage. The smell of roasted chicken and fresh pie filled the room. People greeted Rhett everywhere he went. Most nodded politely towards Zora. Some smiled. Others simply accepted what they had been told, that she was Mrs. Dawson. The lie had become surprisingly comfortable, which frightened her more than she cared to admit. For nearly an hour, everything went well. Then the doors opened. The room changed. Not suddenly, not dramatically, just enough. A subtle shift. Conversations quieted. Heads turned. Silas Whitaker entered with 2 men and a lawyer carrying a leather document case. Silas looked exactly as Zora remembered. Expensive coat, perfect gloves. The calm confidence of a man accustomed to getting his way. His eyes found her immediately. The smile that followed never reached them. Miss Bennett, he said. The fiddles stopped playing. Silence spread through the hall. Zora slow stood. Rhett rose beside her. Silas adjusted his cuffs. I've been searching a long time. Then perhaps you should search elsewhere. The smile remained. Unfortunately, I cannot. The lawyer stepped forward. Ladies and gentlemen, he announced. There appears to be some confusion regarding this woman. Murmurs filled the room. Zora felt every eye turn toward her. The lawyer opened the case. Documents emerged. Contracts, letters, official stamps. He has papers, someone whispered. Silas never looked away from her. You left without explanation. I left because I chose to. A few people exchanged uneasy glances. The lawyer continued speaking. Words like agreement, obligation, engagement, responsibility. the kind of language that sounded respectable while hiding something ugly underneath. Zora's stomach tightened. She could feel the room shifting, doubt spreading, exactly as Silas intended. Then Silas looked directly at Rhett. A rancher should know better than to involve himself in another man's affairs. The room went still. Rhett took one step forward. No speech, no argument, no anger, just one step. Then he reached for Zora. She barely had time to inhale. His hand settled gently against her cheek. And before anyone understood what he intended to do, he kissed her. The church hall froze, completely. No music, no whispers, nothing. Only silence. The kiss lasted a moment, no longer, but long enough. When Rhett stepped back, every doubt in the room had vanished. He turned toward Silas. "Seems like my affairs now." No one laughed. No one spoke. Silas stared at him. For the first time since arriving, the banker looked genuinely unsettled. A few moments later, he gathered his documents and left. The lawyer followed. The crowd slowly began breathing again. Music eventually returned. Conversations resumed. But nothing felt quite the same, not after that. The ride home happened beneath a sky full of stars. The mountains glowed silver beneath moonlight. Neither spoke much. The kiss remained between them, unmentioned, impossible to ignore. When they reached Mustang Ridge, Rhett disappeared into the barn before she could say goodnight. The next morning, he left before sunrise. The morning after that, too. And somehow, the distance felt louder than words. 3 days later, Zora returned to the office and opened the hidden ledger. The pages revealed more than land fraud. Much more. Names, transactions, property transfers. One entry stopped her cold. Whitaker Holdings, year 1879. The property description matched part of Mustang Ridge Ranch. She searched deeper, then deeper still. By dusk, the truth became impossible to deny. Years ago, Silas's family had taken land from the Dawsons through fraudulent deals buried beneath legal paperwork. The same family hunting her had once destroyed part of Rhett's future. The realization settled heavily over her. She found Rhett near the barn after sunset. When she told him what she had discovered, he said nothing for a very long time. The wind moved softly through the pines. Finally, he looked toward the mountains. "I always wondered. You suspected? Not enough to prove it." His voice sounded distant, older somehow. Neither noticed the small figure standing just beyond the stable door. Lily. Listening, watching, hearing more than she was meant to. A few minutes later, she quietly slipped away. One sentence repeating inside her mind. "Not my wife. Not really." And for the first time since Zora arrived at Mustang Ridge Ranch, Lily understood that the story everyone believed might not be true after all. The discovery sat quietly inside her. She didn't cry. She didn't confront anyone. She simply became quieter. Zora noticed it first. The little girl still attended reading lessons, still helped Abigail shell beans in the kitchen, still followed the ranch dogs around the yard. But something had changed. Questions lingered behind her eyes. One evening, while the sun disappeared behind the western ridges, Lily sat on the porch steps, turning pages of a book without reading them. Zora lowered herself beside her. The air smelled of pine and cold earth. "You seem far away tonight." Lily stared at the mountains. "Are you leaving?" The question arrived so suddenly that Zora couldn't answer right away. "Why would you ask that?" Lily shrugged. "Sometimes people leave." A long silence followed, the kind that carried more truth than words. Finally, Zora reached over and gently straightened the ribbon in Lily's hair. "I'm here today." It wasn't a promise, but it was honest. Lily seemed satisfied with that. For now, the next few days passed peacefully, almost too peacefully. Spring remained weeks away, but the harshest part of her had loosened its grip. Snowmelt trickled beneath fence rails. The creek behind the barn ran louder each afternoon. Rhett spent most days repairing storm damage with Walter and the others. At night, the ranch settled into familiar routines. Coffee after supper, books by the fire, the sound of wind moving through the pines, normal things, good things. The kind people never realize they're enjoying until they're gone. The trouble came on a Thursday night. Just after 10, Zora woke to shouting. Then another sound, a horse screaming. She was already pulling on her boots when she smelled smoke. The moment she stepped into the hallway, she saw orange light flashing through the windows. The barn. By the time she reached the porch, half the ranch was already moving. Men carried buckets. Others dragged hoses from the water trough. Snow hissed beneath falling sparks. "Walter!" Rhett's voice cut through the chaos. "Get the horses out." The old ranch hand was already running. The barn doors burst open. Terrified animals rushed into the night. Steam rose from their bodies. The fire climbed one wall and then another. Not large enough to destroy the whole structure, but far too deliberate to be an accident. Someone had started it. Zora knew it. Rhett knew it. Everyone knew it. The fire was finally brought under control near midnight. Smoke drifted across the moonlit yard. The ranch hand stood exhausted and blackened with soot. Then Abigail appeared from the house. Her face had gone pale. "Rhett." The way she said his name made everyone turn. "What is it?" "Lily." A pause. "She's gone." Everything stopped. Rhett moved first. "How long?" "I checked her room after the fire started." Abigail's voice shook. The bed was empty. The next hour passed in a blur of lanterns and horses. Every building was searched. Every shed. Every fence line. Nothing. Then Ben found it. A folded piece of paper nailed to the charred barn door. Rhett pulled it free. The message was short. "Bring the ledger. Devil's Pass. Come alone." The handwriting was unfamiliar. The meaning wasn't. Silas. Zora felt the blood drain from her face. "No." Rhett folded the note once, very carefully. The stillness that settled over him frightened her more than anger would have. "We leave now. You can't go alone." "Yes, no." The word escaped before she could stop it. Every eye turned toward her. She stepped forward. "If Silas wants the ledger, then he wants me too." Rhett met her gaze. The wind shifted between them, cold, sharp. "You stay here. I'm coming, Zora. I'm coming." Neither looked away. Finally, Walter cleared his throat. "Boss." Rhett didn't answer. "She's right." The silence stretched. Then Rhett nodded once. A tiny movement, barely visible, but enough. "Stay close," he said. They left 15 minutes later. 6 riders moving through moonlit snow. The trail climbed north toward Devil's Pass, an abandoned silver mine hidden among broken cliffs and narrow canyons. The ride lasted nearly 2 hours. Nobody spoke much. The only sounds were hooves against frozen ground and leather saddles creaking in the dark. Near dawn they reached the old mine. The buildings stood empty, weathered, leaning, ghosts of another century. A lantern burned near the entrance, and beside it stood Silas Whitaker, perfectly dressed, as though he had stepped out of a bank office instead of a frozen mountain pass. Lily sat nearby wrapped in a blanket, unhurt but frightened. The moment she saw Rhett, she stood. "Uncle Rhett!" Relief flashed across his face. "Gone almost immediately." Silas smiled. "Thank you for coming." Rhett dismounted slowly. "You have my niece, for the moment. Let her go." Silas glanced toward Zora. "I'll consider it." Zora climbed down from her horse. "You wanted me." Silas looked almost pleased. "I wanted reason." His smile faded slightly. "You've caused me considerable inconvenience. You tried to buy a human being." "No." Silas adjusted a glove. "I settled a debt." The words hung in the freezing air. Then he looked directly at Rhett. "Perhaps she never told you." Zora froze. Silas continued. "Her father owed more money than he could repay." "No," Zora whispered, "but she already knew." Silas smiled sadly. The marriage wasn't about affection. His eyes never left Rhett. It was payment. The truth struck harder spoken aloud, not because it was new, because it was real, because another person had heard it. For several seconds, nobody moved. Then Rhett stepped forward, slowly, deliberately. The mountain wind rattled loose boards nearby. His eyes never left Silas. "You took people's land." Silas shrugged. "Business. You took hers too. Also business." The silence that followed felt endless. Then Rhett crossed the remaining distance. The confrontation lasted only moments. Voices shouting, men moving, confusion in the darkness. Nothing anyone would later remember clearly except one thing. Rhett reached Silas. And when he did, years of anger finally reached him too. For the ranch, for the stolen land, for Lily, for Zora, for everything. He had every reason to keep going, every reason not to stop. Then he heard his name. Rhett, Zora's voice, nothing more, just his name. He looked toward her, saw the fear in her eyes, not fear of Silas. Fear for him, for what anger might leave behind. The moment stretched, then slowly, very slowly, Rhett stepped back. The mountain wind moved through the canyon. Silas remained where he was, breathing hard, no longer smiling. He isn't worth it, Zora said quietly. Rhett looked at her, then nodded, once. Far below the cliffs, another sound echoed through the darkness. Horsemen, more riders, coming fast. And none of them belonged to Silas Whitaker. For one long second, nobody moved. The sound of approaching horses echoed through Devil's Pass, bouncing off the canyon walls. Silas turned first. For the first time all night, uncertainty crossed his face. The riders appeared moments later. 6 men. 2 deputy marshals, the Silver Creek sheriff, and behind them rode Judge Henry Calloway, a man whose reputation carried weight across 3 counties. The sheriff pulled his horse to a stop. His eyes landed on Silas, then on the ledger clutched beneath Zora's arm. "Well," he said quietly, "looks like we finally found what we've been looking for." Silas recovered quickly. "You have no authority here," the sheriff smiled. "Actually, I do." One deputy unfolded a document. Federal warrants. Land fraud, forgery, extortion, illegal property seizures. The charges seemed endless. Silas listened without speaking. His confidence drained away one line at a time. When the deputy finished reading, the canyon felt strangely quiet. The wind moved through the old mine timbers. Somewhere above them, a loose piece of metal rattled softly. The sheriff extended a hand. "Mr. Whitaker." Silas stared at the warrant, then at Zora. "You did this." "No," she said calmly. "You did." For a moment it looked like he wanted to argue. Instead, he laughed once. A tired laugh. Then he surrendered without another word. The deputies escorted him away. His boots disappeared into the darkness. And just like that, the man who had controlled so many lives was gone. The ride back to Mustang Ridge happened beneath a sky full of stars. Lily slept wrapped in a blanket against Abigail's shoulder. Walter hummed quietly while riding beside the wagon. Nobody talked much. There was nothing left to say. Some victories arrived loudly. Others arrived in silence. This one felt silent. 3 weeks later, spring finally reached the mountains. Snow melted from the lower fields. The creek ran fast and clear. Wildflowers began appearing beside the trails. Life returned. News traveled quickly through Colorado. The evidence inside the ledger proved everything. Several ranchers recovered land that had been taken unfairly. Contracts were overturned. Claims were canceled. Families who had nearly lost everything were given a second chance. Silver Creek changed, so did Zora. For the first time in years, nobody was chasing her. Nobody was waiting to decide her future. Nobody owned a single piece of her life. One morning she stood outside the train station holding a ticket. The same station where she had arrived months earlier. The platform looked different now. Warmer, brighter, less frightening. The train whistle echoed through the valley. Passengers climbed aboard. The conductor checked watches and schedules. Zora looked down at the ticket in her hand. Then she folded it, slowly, carefully, and slipped it into her coat pocket. She never boarded. Instead, she turned around and walked away from the tracks, back toward town, back toward the mountains, back toward Mustang Ridge. By summer, construction began on a small one-room schoolhouse near the ranch. The building wasn't fancy. Rough pine walls, a cast-iron stove, 12 desks built by Walter and the ranch hands. But it was enough. Lily became the first student. Then came the children from neighboring ranches. Soon every desk was filled. Some rode horses for over an hour each morning just to attend class. Zora taught reading, writing, arithmetic, history, and every afternoon when lessons ended, Lily remained behind to help sweep the floor. Those became Zora's favorite moments. Simple moments, honest moments, the kind that quietly become memories. Autumn arrived. Golden leaves covered the trails. The schoolhouse windows glowed with lamplight each evening. One Saturday, Zora sat on the porch of the ranch house reviewing lesson plans. Rhett was repairing a saddle strap nearby. Neither spoke much. They never needed to. The silence between them had changed. Months earlier, silence had felt uncertain. Now it felt comfortable, like home. Lily burst through the front door carrying a small wooden box. "I found these." She dropped the box onto the porch table. Inside were 2 old rings. Abigail looked up from her knitting. Walter immediately found something very interesting happening across the yard and walked away. Lily placed both rings directly between Zora and Rhett. Then she folded her arms. "I'm tired of waiting." Rhett blinked. "For what?" Lily looked genuinely shocked. "For this," she pointed at both of them. Abigail suddenly became very busy studying her knitting. Zora fought a smile. Rhett cleared his throat. Lily shook her head. "Seriously, Lily, no." The little girl pointed at one ring. "Months ago you told everybody she was your wife." Then she pointed at the second. "Now maybe you should ask her for real." A long silence followed, the kind that only family can survive. Finally, Rhett reached for one of the rings. His hand paused for just a moment. Then he stood. The autumn wind moved through the cottonwood trees. Somewhere in the distance, horses grazed peacefully near the lower pasture. Zora looked up at him. He looked nervous. Not frightened, not uncertain, just honest. More honest than she had ever seen him. "That night in Silver Creek," he said quietly. "I asked for one night." Lily grinned immediately. Abigail closed her eyes as if she had been waiting forever. Rhett kept going. "I thought it would end when the storm ended." His gaze never left Zora. It didn't. The porch became very still. "The truth is," he said, "I stopped wanting it to end a long time ago." Zora felt tears gathering before she could stop them. Not sadness. Something softer, something warmer. Rhett held out the ring. "This time I'm not asking for one night." His voice lowered. "I'm asking for every day after." For a second, she couldn't answer. The mountains stood behind him. The ranch stretched across the valley. The schoolhouse sat beyond the pasture with sunlight glowing in its windows. Everything she had built, everything she had found, everything she thought she had lost forever, it was all here. So was he. Zora smiled. Then she held out her hand. "Yes," Lily cheered loud enough to startle the horses. Abigail laughed through tears. Walter shouted something from the barn that nobody could understand, and Rhett slipped the ring onto her finger. Church bells rang the following month in Silver Creek. Friends filled every pew. Ranchers came from miles away. Children from the school carried flowers. The valley seemed brighter that day. Years later, people still told the story. Some said it was about a powerful banker who finally lost. Others said it was about justice, or courage, or second chances. Lily always told it differently. According to her, it was very simple. A woman stepped off a train during a snowstorm. A cowboy told her to be his wife for one night, and neither of them ever recovered from that mistake. Mustang Ridge Ranch flourished. The school continued growing. Laughter echoed through the house that had once felt too quiet. And every evening, as the sun disappeared behind the Rocky Mountains, Rhett and Zora sat together on the porch, watching the valley turn gold. No storms, no lies, no running, just home. The place both of them had been searching for all along. And maybe that's what stays with us after a story like this. Not the blizzard, not the danger, not even the fight that finally brought the truth into the light. Maybe it's the quiet moments. A little girl placing 2 old rings on a table, a ranch porch at sunset. 2 people who stopped running long enough to realize they had already found what they were looking for. If you put yourself in Zora's place, would you have trusted a stranger on the worst night of your life? If you put yourself in Rhett's place, would you have opened your heart after years of carrying old wounds? Most of us will never stand in a snowstorm outside a frontier saloon. But sooner or later, we all face a moment when fear tells us to keep moving and something deeper asks us to stay. Maybe that's the lesson hidden inside this story. Sometimes healing doesn't arrive all at once. Sometimes it looks like a safe place at the end of a long road, a hand reaching for yours, a family that wasn't there yesterday, a future you never planned for but somehow needed. And sometimes love isn't about finding someone perfect. It's about finding someone who sees your scars and chooses to sit beside you anyway. Before you go, I'd love to know, what moment in this story stayed with you the most? And if stories about courage, second chances, family, and unexpected love feel like a good place to spend an evening, I hope you'll join us again. There are still many heartfelt journeys waiting just beyond the next trail, and I'd be honored to share them with you.